All right, we are live with filmmaker Gemma Fleming. Gemma Fleming, writer-director Senshi. Gemma, am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's actually Gemma.
Gemma, thank you. Gemma Fleming. And Gemma, a little bit about Senshi, is that correct? Is that how do you say it?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's warrior
It
in
does.
Japanese.
It does.
Okay, and I believe you're a warrior. You are a boxer, mixed martial artist. What?
I'm a amateur Muay Thai kickboxer.
Amateur Muay Thai kickboxer. Wow. Okay. And how long? And that's partially. You told me about a little black eye. It doesn't look too bad.
Nah,
I bet.
it's small. It's not that bad at all. Just a little clip.
Yeah, you should see the other guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long you been doing that?
I started training at a gym, I want to say about 3.5 years ago, and I started competing after my first year, so let's say about 2 and change.
Oh wow! So just right off the bat, you started competing real soon.
Yeah, I gave it some time. You know, my coaches and I came to the gym originally just to kind of learn. Well, basically, one motivation was to get fit, and then the other was, having an outlet to kind of, release a lot of like my pent up aggression. But also, I've always wanted to train in some sort of combat sport. So when I started training, I became more fascinated in testing myself. So I asked my coaches, hey, kind of waiting for like the Karate Kid moment where the coach is like, "You're the one, you can do it." I wanted to make sure that the timing was right and that I didn't rush into fighting. But yeah, usually like it was like about a year until they were like, "Okay, I think we can get you your first fight." So.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's pretty quick, in relative terms, and you obviously must be pretty good at it, and you really click to it and love it to take it to that next level so soon. I like how you mentioned aggression, and it really in this context of a woman filmmaker making a feminist film, and I think your film. You're also a photographer, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you wrote and directed and shot the film, I believe.
Yeah, the whole thing was just sort of a passion project. I originally approached the project as a filmmaker, not a fighter, and I wanted to photograph or excuse me, film two of my training partners, and it just sort of kind of grew into like this larger, more holistic view on women in combat sports. So organically, the film became more than just like a narrative on two athletes. There's like roughly 16 in the film, but in that process, I ended up having to sort of storyboard it, schedule it, shoot it. I had probably 2 extra people help with being on camera, but other than that, it's kind of a one-woman show.
Wow. So, I mean, to me, the way I would describe the film is a visual, beautiful, gorgeous cinematic meditation on feminism and warrior, the warrior spirit as it relates to the female gender. And it does also, as I say that, it's not strictly a feminist film. It does definitely transcend into the warrior spirit, but you don't see, the reason I say it's a feminist is because you don't see women fighting depicted, in this style between the beautiful and the aggressive. And that's a great combination. So, I mean, I wonder if you look at it as a feminist film.
Do I look at it as a feminist film?
Yeah.
I guess everything that I do has like a sort of like a feminist foundation because I am a woman and I do want to be seen for my merit and my work, not necessarily for the subscribed sex or gender that most people see me as. So I think everything that I do is automatically feminist in that regard. So yes.
Right. And we wouldn't call it a feminist film if we saw numerous or, a healthy outpouring in terms of like volume work from women filmmakers about women. But since you don't really see it, then all of a sudden it becomes feminist.
Yeah, and you don't want to use feminism as a trope either. I think any woman that does make some sort of art, be it writing or the visual in the sense of film or photography, they are speaking a lot about their own personal experiences. If it's something that really means a lot to them. So I think feminism occurs in all parts of, the self-portrait of that person, even though it's not an auto portrait, everything that an artist creates is about themselves. So yeah, I think, you know, it's a feminist film, but I'm not necessarily putting on the byline. It's sort of a given.
Right, right. Yeah, makes sense. And basically, just to, you know, kind of refine, if the world was equal, there would be no feminism and there would be no need for it, right?
Well, we would, yeah, I mean, we would all be the same, but you know, that's always kind of a hot topic for discussion. But I'm glad that that's always, you know, that's something that's being brought a lot of attention towards, you know, good or bad, at least the attention's being brought to it.
Well, cool. And so to switch it to the human side and talk about the human side of this film that we can all kind of get down with. Beautifully done, you know, really visual, very cinematic. I find it interesting that you call it a narrative because there is certainly a narrative structure to it, but it's definitely not a typical storyline that is narrative. But before we even explore that, why? You know, that's the first question to play forward. Why this film? Why did you go into the time, money, effort?
Okay. Well, going back to the two women that are in the film, my boxing coach, Susan Marlucci Reno, and one of my training partners, also like a huge mentor to me, Phoenix Carnevale. They were part of just sort of this this piece that I wanted to do, and it was supposed to be really short, of just sort of exploring the physical capabilities that they have as martial artists. But the why now that it's grown into a larger sense, it's just giving a voice to a larger community of women, especially those that have been competing like long before the limelight of popularization of martial arts through venues like, you know, MMA, especially, you know, UFC and Ronda Rousey. I wanted to show that, yes, the martial arts has been in every forum and in every essence a woman's sport, but we've often always, because of the aggression, the violence of it, lent it towards the more masculine side. So I wanted to show kind of how being a woman does have those moments where combat sports kind of like unifies in it. It's like a constant question of why it took so long for people to always think that the martial arts was something that women would not approach. So
well, it's funny. So I appreciate that, but I want to go deeper than that, right? Because I don't, you know, we're trying to get away from the whole feminist thing. So you're saying you did this as a way to, you know, bring attention to female fighters, and to me, it's like, well, all right, there are other ways to do that. I mean, if you want to do that, you didn't have to make a short film. I mean, the very first scene of this short film starts out in a church with a religious overtone, and then you have this quote right here by Elaine Tobias: "Part of mortality's significance is that war ends." Part of mortality's significance. So what does that mean to you? How does that relate to the film? I mean, that's setting up the whole context of the film. Why? What's the narrative? Why?
Why in regards to the quote? Well, the quote's a good thing to start with. That's why I use it to open the film, is that inevitably the significance of all things is that your body and your mind does come to rest. You know, a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to get, you know, to like, people I feel like avoid conflict. And conflict is one of those things that, you know, does eventually have to come to an end, but because of the conflict, you learn to become a better person. So when I open up the film, one of the things that I wanted to show is sort of like, what have I experienced as a martial artist? Well, doing the martial arts has had a religious tone to it. And there's also archetypes in religion that have had warriors in it, like Joan of Arc. So one of the first people you see in the film, besides the silhouette of the Asian American girl, is the Joan of Arc character. I felt it was a good way to open the film and show that, you know, while combat sports or martial arts, whatever you want to call it, your practice is what a lot of people call it, that eventually has a lot of conflict in it as you practice with other people, as you have like sparring partners, but eventually when your body and your mind comes to rest, that's sort of where you kind of find yourself at peace. So that's why I kind of married the church opening with that quote. It kind of stuck together. And it wasn't something that I necessarily even planned, but as I was working through the film, I found out that the storyline kind of came together more in the editing process than the filming process. So that's how I kind of made those two stick together.
That's very cool. So it's this idea of enlightenment through struggle.
Right, correct. And I mean,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to struggle, but personally for me, I've always found that I learn lessons better the hard way. That's just the way that, you know, I've grown up. And so that kind of comes across in a lot of the storytelling process that I found was very key in the editing, and very much like, I think hopefully with you watching, you can kind of agree that comes across in the viewer's perspective.
So, you know, Gemma, it's interesting. I just recently finished this intensive yoga training thing, and one of the guys that I did it with is this Brazilian jiu-jitsu martial artist. He has a studio. He's been teaching for years. He was a world champion. Anyway, one of the things he constantly told me is, he said, you know, in his Brazilian Portuguese accent, you know, a little bit of suffering is good. A little bit of suffering is good, right? And so, you know, most of us try to avoid suffering all our lives. So there's this concept that it has a purpose. And
it does. I think so. I mean, I've always kind of had the personal mission in me that I can't quite trust someone unless they've been through something. Not that you have to go through extreme amounts of conflict or discourse, but it really, seeing people who have been through the worst, they often have a lot more compassion than those who have never had any tests in their life. And I've always admired that about.
Right, true that, very true. So Gemma, why? Sorry, I'll get off the lie. What did you want to say making this film?
What did I want to say making this film?
Yeah, or what did you want the film to say?
Well, you know, it's very sticky talking about work that's had a lot of different changes in the process. So when I started working on this, you know, I'm going back, I was working on it with the two girls. And then as I was sort of working on this, I actually had to take a break for a bit because I had a lot of personal things I had to take care of. So in the process of making it, I actually almost gave up on finishing it.
Not uncommon.
What was that?
Not uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, people kind of get like that, especially in the creative process. And when you don't have a crew working with you and deadlines, you sort of you depend on yourself a lot for getting it done and for just getting the whole thing produced. But the break that I took was well needed, even though very discouraging. So I guess another why as to why I would say that I did is also just to see it through, to finish it. It became a lot more meaningful to do it on my time than having to create this like almost impossible schedule of getting completed. So for the why for me personally was just to see something through, like to see it to its end goal. So that is also another why.
No, that's cool. And then in terms of what did you want to say?
I think it goes back to having that voice, that community of women in martial arts. I wanted to say that, yes, we're here. Yes, we have been here, and we come in all shapes and sizes and colors. But, you know, a lot of times from what you can, what you see visually, like if you're not familiar with the fighting world, is oftentimes you don't see a lot of women in any sport, or not just restricted to combat sports. So I just wanted to kind of also make this like this love letter for other women, being like, yes, I do see you. Yes, I see you in the sense of your striking, your form, but I also see you in those vulnerable moments where you're crying, where you're not complete, and where a lot of times you need your counterpart, your male counterpart. There's a couple of moments in the film where I include two very important men in my life. One is my romantic partner, and the other one is my coach. And I try to avoid using them as props. I tried trying to include them in ways that would make sense to these stories' archetypes. So that film became something that I needed to finish to also heal myself. So that's another why as well.
Oh, that's cool. Well, and that's, you know, so important in terms of like, what is a warrior? Like the full spectrum of a warrior isn't just the guy that, you know, is like He-Man and goes out there and destroys,
right,
or She-Ra or whatever, but has the, you know, there's a great quote, I think it's Patton, it's on my phone. Success is how high you bounce when you hit bottom.
Right. Yeah. You know, get hit or fall. You know, is it fall down 7 times, get up an 8th time? You know, it's very important that you going back to struggle again, that, you know, a lot of the resources that you have is in yourself. But
Yeah.
you don't realize it's there because, you know, I found starting training at the gym that, you know, you see a lot of people who are really confident or seem really confident, but they have this internal dialogue in their head, always doubting themselves and nervousness. That there's a lot of anxious people in martial arts. Maybe I'm speaking mostly for the people that I see.
Oh, I just think the world. I mean, come on.
But there's, you know, there's sort of, there's that community around you that you sort of feel like you know, I always feel like I've, not just necessarily in the sense of a warrior, but I've always identified with the character of the matriarch. I spent a lot of time raising my cousins. So this film, I felt like as I was meeting these women, even though a lot of them were different in age range, I felt like I was sort of like telling their story like a mother would about like their favorite child, which should be all your children. So this is, again, that love letter that I wanted to create for all the women I met.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and that's, you know, so cool. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that you said is that you wanted to create this love letter to say, I see you.
Yeah.
You know, and it's so important for people just to get that recognition that they are being seen. And so often, whether it's at the corporate workplace, office, home, wherever it might be, you know, they're just not getting the recognition of, I see you, who you are, how hard you're working, and what you are doing. And that goes such a long way. And everybody needs that. So it's very cool. And it brings us down to the last question is, what's changed for you personally since making this film?
What's changed for me?
Yeah.
Well, the film came out, I ended up releasing it the week of the election, like right after the results had come through. And, you know, it was a really hard time for a lot of women, especially, you know, women in my community who were of color. And the film came out, and I even thought about pushing the date back because I knew a lot of people were sort of in like a distressed mental state. But I ended up sort of talking with a couple of the, I spoke with the gallery owner, and we were thinking, you know what, let's just kind of put it out there. I sent a mass email to everyone saying, like, listen, if you make it, great. If not, I totally understand, but this is a safe space. You don't have to worry about anything except just being yourself, enjoying the film, and being around what I would hope is a community of people who understand what you're going through. And I mean, all walks of life showed up. We had people who voted for the current president. We had people who obviously were extremely, you know, opposed. But the one thing that, you know, when we had a panel, I just sort of said out loud, I was like, listen, you know, differences aside on the political spectrum, just respect today that there are going to be a lot of people who are obsessed and need your support. And if you don't support the same political views, just support them as a woman. Just support them as someone who needs that counterpart. A lot of times what I find is you make these pieces and the timing always seems to kind of like push it out of the way, whether it be your personal spectrum or the political climate. But what has changed significantly is I've had a lot of women approach me saying that it's helped them find inner strength in a specific situation that had something to do with, you know, post-election anxiety or just being flat out depressed. So for me, I feel like I've kind of taken on this role, again, as caretaker, the matriarch, that I personally find my parts really, you know, close and dear to. So from what's changed is I've had a lot of independent, you know, younger female, you know, aspiring filmmakers ask me, like, how did you do it? What's, you know, how do you get into filmmaking? So I feel like I've kind of taken on the role of a teacher as well. So the film brought on a lot of, it's kind of built a nice community around me that I greatly appreciate, because I love seeing women be inspired to create in, you know, moments where they feel they are the most vulnerable.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of great stuff. I mean, it sounds like you've gotten a little more recognition. You've helped people, you know, to find some answers and have some direction. So how does that change for you? I mean, if you look at where you were before you were making this film and where you are now, you know,
oh yeah,
in a few words, how would you do that?
I'm different, and I'm happy for it.
How are you different?
I feel like I've become a lot more patient with myself. I feel like I've always done a lot to take care of others and be patient for them. So a lot of the things that I'm starting to realize is, and you know, I work a lot with people in the commercial industry for like, you know, fashion photography, and I found that a lot of that is great, but it can also take you away from the stuff that makes you so happy to get up and create. So I found that I'm gearing a lot of my own free time to working with women in the community to either learn about making their own films or photography, or even just photographing more women in general to bring awareness. So that's also something that's like changed for me as well. Whereas like, you know, I would be so kind of, as you understand, work focused that it you know, kind of took you away from like the main mission why you wanted to make these things.
So it's, I mean, I think the patience is the biggest lesson. How do you think making the film contributed to your patience?
It allowed me to make mistakes. It allowed me to take my time. I also learned that it's okay if you're not happy with how it turns out. And you know, I'm very happy with how the film turned out, but there were times where I would be in the middle of editing and I just couldn't find like that right cadence to the story, and I had to be okay with walking away from it. So a lot of the patience that I exercised with family members and friends, I've never had for myself, ever. But making this film taught me that. And that I feel like is an unseen lesson that I will always be grateful for.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, I think that's a huge learning for all of us. You know, all of us can grow more patient with ourselves or the people that we love or the people that we're just meeting on the street and rub us the wrong way. So, you know, the true mark of a warrior, and as, you know, the greatest warriors know, I mean, the smartest thing is to get away from confrontation in terms of, you know, not get in a fight in terms of a physical fight.
Right.
But confrontation does meet us in life. We don't have to be afraid of it, and failure and repeat attempts are part of the warrior path, right?
Yeah, and it's okay to be afraid. I mean, the one thing that I learned a lot is I have grown up under a lot of fear and stress, and a lot of that was projected onto me by people that were closest to me. And you learn that fear as a survival mechanism. It keeps you out of trouble. Unfortunately, to a point, it hinders you from living. So, you know,
Keeps what was that last part? It keeps you.
it hinders you from living. If you're always afraid of things, you end up missing out on a lot, and that's okay. If you know, people are always like, oh, there are those once in a lifetime opportunities, but you know, it's not like, you know, the train passes and it never comes back again. There's always in some form a chance to improve your life, or you know, some people want to, you know, get that job, or you know, sign that contract, or have that fight, and miss out on it because of personal stuff, because they have these fears and reservations. Once you start to realize that that was a part of you that taught you how to survive specific situations, you let it live inside a space, inside of your mind, inside of you, and you accept it, and it's sort of, it never goes away, but it just becomes less powerful over you.
Beautiful. You know, because I was going to ask you, how do you deal with your fear? I mean, I think you just told me.
Oh, how do I deal with it? It's been like a hard process, to be honest. But um, it always takes more than just yourself. You know, I always had really close friends growing up that helped me sort of work through that. You know, a lot of times you feel that sufficiency means being by yourself. Like, there's a difference between understanding self, who you are in existence, and being, you know, isolated. So I think having like, you know, I keep in touch with a lot of these women, some of these women in the film, especially, you know, people I see day to day, and they help me work through those fears too. So you know, again, I can't say that you know, a light switch went off and I was no longer afraid. I still have to work through a lot of that, you know, every day. Every day there's at least one moment where I feel afraid, but I know that I can be okay. If I'm not okay, I can always ask for help.
Well, that's such a mature attitude, and certainly a hard won, hard fought attitude that no doubt that you've endured and overcome a great deal in your life. And thank you for sharing with us so candidly today. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing wisdom. Thanks for sharing Senshi.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I know it's kind of a special occasion because I wasn't on, like, I wasn't elected except through you guys, so that this was very flattering. So I'm completely taken aback by it. I can't thank you.
You're very, very welcome. You came highly recommended by a close Digipops TV associate, so we certainly decided to make an exception, and you will be the spawn of a second lineage. So now we'll have two lineages going on Play It Forward. So thanks for that.
Yeah. No,
all right, Gemma Fleming, filmmaker, writer, director, photographer, warrior. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or a comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.